This is my review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's ninth film, which I saw last night. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a kind of three-track movie. You've got one track which is about this fading TV star called Rick Dalton, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and you see him getting involved in lots of bit parts that he's trying to get now. His career is on the slide. One track is about Cliff Booth, I think it is, a stuntman played by Brad Pitt, who has a kind of extended run-in with the Manson family cult around Charles Manson. And a third track, which is mostly dialogue-free, around Margot Robbie playing Sharon Tate, the murdered film star who was married to Roman Polanski. Probably the important thing I thought about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to say is that it doesn't make any sense if you don't know who Sharon Tate is or what happened to her. It's kind of patronising to say that you have to know certain things going into a film, but if you don't know that she was murdered or you don't know the circumstances, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood doesn't make any sense, and the way it builds tension just won't work. So it's worth at least knowing a little bit about the backstory before you go in. It's the most narrative-free of all the films that he's made, so it doesn't have the narrative drive of Django Unchained, and it doesn't have even the episodic drive of Inglourious Basterds. It doesn't have anything like the kind of freewheeling fun of Pulp Fiction. It doesn't have the flashback structure of Reservoir Dogs that narrows down to a certain tension at the end. So some people I can see see it as quite a self-indulgent film. It's certainly quite long. It certainly doesn't have kind of point-to-point storytelling within it. It's quite difficult. It's quite an ambitious film. It leans into the whole fetishizing, is that the word? Fetishizing of culture thing more than any of Tarantino's other movies. You get it in all these films, don't you? But in this one, you get loads and loads of stuff about the music, about the TV stuff that they're watching, about like the record labels, about the different types of food that they're making. And you do get a feeling, or at least I did, that he is making something about his own culture and his own youth, his own background in this, in the way that in Django Unchained, say, he's doing something which is sort of about blaxploitation, sort of a take on American history, or obviously Inglourious Basterds, that kind of like Jewish revenge fantasy World War II movie that he's always wanted to make, or Kill Bill being those kind of kung fu China movies that he was really into. This one is an homage very much to kind of B movies of the 50s and 60s and TV. But goes even further with that and leans into it enormously in that kind of like sensuous kind of cultural eroticism thing that he does really to the nth degree, which I got a lot out of. Lots of people seem to find it quite dull. I found it completely gripping, and I really loved it, really, maybe until the last act. All the stuff with DiCaprio I found absolutely gripping, edge of the seat. I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen him do. It's a really unusual character. He's given an incredible vulnerability to play that you haven't really seen from DiCaprio before. Not just because he's a fading icon, but the way they structure his story brilliantly, really, in a kind of meta way, so that you see him kind of struggling to act and actually doing some really good acting, but then not being able to do it, getting frustrated with himself and being washed up when he plays with a stutter and all these kind of things. I found that really powerful and really sad, and I really loved it, and I thought that was the best stuff I'd seen him do. All the stuff with Brad Pitt does loads of stuff around just the kind of the sheer joy of sort of watching him climb up on a roof at sunset and take his shirt off. All the stuff where he goes to the ranch where the Manson family are living is genuinely creepy and unsettling, and the way it narrows in on a film star who I generally thought was dead, like playing the guy at the heart of that, I thought was enormously effective. You don't see much of Manson himself, although he is in it, which again I really liked. So you didn't give him the narrative, you didn't give him the extra power or the weight, I suppose, of putting all the emphasis on him or giving him words. You just see that he's kind of affecting, you see the kind of the cultural meaning of what he's doing, and that kind of the hippie-ish anti-establishment culture and where that sits in this kind of faded Hollywood at the end of the 60s. I thought that was really good. Some people seem to criticise the film for not giving Sharon Tate much of a voice, and it's true that Margot Robbie doesn't say very much, but I think that's just kind of because Margot Robbie is a A-list film star, and because she's cast in that part, you expect her, maybe your audiences might expect her to have a bigger part. But what she's playing is the kind of idealized fantasy of Sharon Tate and this person who's going to be a film star, and you get to see her go and see herself at the cinema, and you see the real Sharon Tate on the screen as she does, and that has this kind of building sadness because you know what's coming in terms of how the last act is going to play out, and that that you're slowly making your way towards these murders. I loved it really. I loved all that. I thought it had a real power. I thought it has a kind of circling tension as it goes towards the end. There's something genuinely sad about DiCaprio's character and something really nuanced about his relationship with Pitt. I thought that worked brilliantly. Or the endless shots of Pitt just driving in LA and at the end of the 60s have a real dynamite charge to them, and the cinematography has this kind of like kind of butter-kissed warmth in terms of LA in a sunset at the end of the 60s, which I really enjoyed. I love the playfulness of it all. My only problem with it is, I won't give it away in terms of what it is or what happens, but even though the ending is shocking and I suppose unexpected, and certainly lots of reviews I've read say that it is, I thought it was quite predictable. In the end, what does happen is what I thought would happen as I watched it, and I think the kind of meta aspect of having seen Tarantino's other movies, particularly if you've seen Inglourious Basterds, probably gives away what is going to happen at the end of the film. And in the way that Django Unchained has a really violent ending, but the violence feels like a cathartic payback for slavery in basic terms, or the way Inglourious Basterds gives you a kind of Jewish revenge fantasy, and when they're machine gunning Hitler, you can kind of get off on that thing. It never happened. The violence at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood didn't feel as earned. It didn't give me the same sense of catharsis. In fact, it even feels maybe slightly conservative, or it feels a bit more like a kind of masculine, regressive view of kind of violence and revenge that I found a bit uncomfortable. I don't mind violence, it doesn't upset me, but I didn't think it worked in the kind of emotional, cathartic way that it's clearly meant to. And it isn't done with any irony, and it isn't done with any spice in terms of what he's getting at. It is fairly clear in terms of why he's written the ending as it is. But it's certainly bold, it's certainly interesting. I like the last shot and the way it plays out, the kind of fantasy element of what you've seen before. So not in the same league, I think, as Pulp Fiction. It didn't give me the same satisfaction of Django. I've really enjoyed Tarantino's recent movies. I really loved Inglourious Basterds. Thought it was great, and then thought Django was fantastic in a real mature film, a really step up. Had real characters and real warmth and real heart. And then I thought The Hateful Eight, because it's an old script that he dusted down and made later in his career, was quite regressive and nasty and mean and too long. This, I think, is something else. It is in some senses more mature, and he certainly really leans into the things that he's known for. You get endless shots of beautiful women's feet, and you get the kind of culture porn that I mentioned earlier, but you also get something else. You get a real sense of sadness and tension in the heart of it, and you get an odd sense of kind of the kind of barren bleakness that lies beneath this kind of beautiful Hollywood sunset that I found really powerful, building up to a last shot that I kind of knew was coming, but had a kind of bittersweet twist to it, which I liked a lot. There's some really great stuff in there, and I think a lot of the criticism that it's had is kind of nonsense. The accusations that that doesn't give the female characters enough of a voice, and I think kind of misses the point of what the film is. Or I think Bruce Lee's daughter was complaining about the way the character is handled in the film, but it's very funny and it's clearly meant as a joke, and it doesn't in any way do him down. So again, I think that's kind of missing it. There's been some criticism in terms of the background of Pitt's character and what he's supposed to have done, kind of, and how that fits into a post-Me Too view of the film. But again, I think that's kind of missing the point. And overall, I just found it enormously enjoyable. But I watched it with some people who didn't find it enormously enjoyable, so clearly it is quite a divisive movie. It's not one to just go rock up with your mates and think it's a really easygoing night out, and it's not one that will make any sense if you haven't at least read a little bit about or heard a little bit about the true life events that it does portray. And I didn't buy Damian Lewis as Steve McQueen for a minute, but overall I found it a real buzz, just the sheer thrill of its creativity and the fact that it couldn't be made by anybody else. It's such a big budget movie, which is so adult, a world where we're asked to sit through 5 hours of Avengers, whatever the hell it was, where I'm so bored watching something like this, which is meant for grown-ups and which is bold and fresh and pops and is quite challenging. Was really good. And to watch film stars being cast as people who are non-film stars or want to be film stars has this kind of unusual sizzle that I thought made it really come alive. So I'd heartily recommend it. I loved it. Lots of people don't, but I would say go and make up your own mind, because it's really unique, and I came out of it with a real buzz. So yeah, I recommend.